Let's look at one last special type of lines in this section. That'll be the parallel and perpendicular lines. So if I have two lines, L1 and L2, and L1 has a slope of M1 and L2 has a slope of M2, so super generic, then we're going to look at the properties that makes them either parallel or perpendicular. So our parallel lines look like this. So you have two lines side by side that never touch. And so one way of thinking about that is that they have the same slope. They certainly look like it, and that actually is what the definition of parallel is. So that first slope, M1, has to be equal to M2. So this if and only if you see here tells you that this is a two-sided definition. So if we're told the lines are parallel, we know the slopes are equal. And if the slopes are equal, then we know that the two lines are parallel. So this works both forward and backward. The one for perpendicular does the same thing as well. And perpendicular looks like two lines that are going to intersect at a right angle. So we'll call this one L1, we'll call this one L2. So if we look at this, we see L1 is positive. And if we go 90 degrees off of that, then L2 is negative. So L1 and L2 are going to have opposite signs. And there's one other little catch to this. So we know that perpendicular, if M1 is equal to -1 over M2. So we have the opposite signs, and then we have the reciprocal of the original slope, which means you do 1 divided by the original slope. Okay, so some people refer to this as the flopposite, okay, which means you take your original slope and flip it over or flop it over, and then you give it the opposite sign of what you started with. All right, so let's try just the part where we find the slopes for parallel and perpendicular lines. So this says a line is perpendicular to y equals 8 plus 3x. So I'm going to start by finding the original slope here. And the slope is always that number and its sign that's attached to the x. So my original slope is 3. I'm looking for the slope for perpendicular. So that'll be that flopposite. So I'll do 1 over the original sign, 1 over the original slope, and then I'll give it the opposite sign. Sorry about that. So 1 over 3, and then I'll switch it to a negative sign. All right, number 15, I'm looking for a line that's parallel. So here's my original slope here is m is equal to -5. And if it's parallel, the slope stays exactly the same. So my new line is also going to have a slope of -5. Okay, and some people will do a little subscript on that m, so 2 straight lines for parallel, and they'll do kind of an upside down T for perpendicular. You're certainly welcome to do that if that helps you to keep them straight or not. As long as it's clearly labeled, that's totally fine. We have one last one where we're going to find the slope. So we're looking for a slope perpendicular to this line. And the slope of my original line is 1/9. So if I flip that over, or I do 1 over that, I'm going to get a slope of 9. And then I do need to change the sign. And since the original one was positive, that means this one is going to be negative. So my new slope here is going to be m is equal to -9.